we head towards Copenhagen, there should be no illusions that the hardest part of our journey is in front of us. Each of us must do what we can, when we can, to grow our economies without endangering our planet, and we must all do it together.
Welcome to this half-hour special from Kyoto to Copenhagen. I'm Lubna Hussain. President Obama signaled in his address to the UN Conference on Climate Change that if global warming is allowed to go unchecked, it could trigger a very different global financial crisis. But what most people don't realize is at the heart of all this is the rainforests. Continued deforestation could very well literally cost us the Earth. In just a few weeks' time, environmental ministers will convene in Copenhagen to map out a blueprint for an ambitious global agreement on climate change. It is the largest UN and governmental gathering since the Kyoto Climate Change Conference a decade ago. And a new agreement is needed to reflect the advances in the scientific understanding of global warming and the changing economic times. China, for example, has replaced the US as the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, and the price of oil has soared. Scientists predict that unless humans significantly reduce carbon emissions, sea levels will rise and weather patterns will shift violently.
We risk, with unmanaged climate change, being in a position where temperature increases could be above 5 degrees centigrade. That redraws the planet. We haven't been there for 30 million years. We humans have been around 100,000 or so. We risk taking ourselves in 100 years or so into completely uncharted territory, which would radically redraw where most of us can live.
Human-caused pollution has left our planet on the verge of a tipping point, at which ecosystems will die, releasing massive amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. If that happens, climate change could be irreversible. Countless species will become extinct, and our economic and cultural way of life will be altered forever.
Every few months, sometimes every few weeks, you get a piece of reporting about the problem of climate change that is more dispiriting and more worrying than the one that you got 6 weeks earlier, 3 months earlier.
Imagine billions of environmental refugees, uncertain production of food and water, increasing disease and the prospect of growing social instability. These are the concerns at the heart of the economic debate over what needs to be done to address climate change. And within this discussion lies a pivotal crisis often overlooked: the destruction of the world's tropical rainforests. This potential for planetary turbulence prompted the Prince of Wales 2 years ago to set up his Rainforest project. He has created one of the world's largest public-private NGO partnerships to help halt tropical deforestation and make people more aware of just how vital the rainforest is. The rainforest is an important regulator of our planet's climate, yet its destruction is contributing to climate change on a gigantic scale. The Prince's Rainforest project points out that the most effective action in the short term to stabilize global warming is to stop tropical rainforest destruction. The Prince's Rainforest project has set out an emergency package that would provide substantial funding to rainforest nations, helping them move away from traditional agriculture and logging to pursue alternative economic development paths. To maintain effectiveness, it suggests putting multi-year service agreements in place based on clear performance targets and the creation of rainforest bonds to be issued in global private capital markets to raise upfront financing, and asks for global action to address the drivers of deforestation.
The tropical rainforest issue and the destruction of rainforests has been on the international agenda for about 30 years, and we've had many hundreds of millions of pounds spent, many projects deployed, lots of conferences and individual projects on the ground, but still the destruction continues. And this initial wave over the last 3 decades of concern has been driven by the loss of species and the extinction of wild animals and plants, quite rightly, and also the impacts on indigenous communities of people living in the many different areas of rainforest. But the sense of urgency that's emerged in the last couple of years is being driven by a whole new set of concerns, principally that of climate change, because we know now that the deforestation going on across the tropics is contributing something like a fifth of global greenhouse gas emissions. That's a major, serious contribution to global warming. If one looks at the modelling now being prepared by the climatologists and the reduction pathways we must adopt in order to stabilise global average temperature increase below 2 degrees centigrade, that's what everybody now says we have to do. It's looking pretty impossible to do that if we don't stop tropical deforestation.
Now, in light of the upcoming Copenhagen summit, what is it that you would like to see happening now?
Well, we certainly hope that the Copenhagen Climate Summit will lead to a long-term deal that will mobilise the resources needed for countries to embark on different development paths. But that's going to take something like a decade, we anticipate. And so what we're urging countries to do is to come together and put in place an emergency funding package as early as next year.
After the break, we'll take a look at why it makes economic sense to protect the rainforest. We'll also be hearing from some of the biggest names in business backing the campaign that has generated so much public interest.
Companies and indeed governments are for the first time really taking this area seriously.